Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre. Any questions? And along with the map, as you can see, they lived along the Mediterranean Sea, are the many products that they exported. Questions or comments?
Yeah, so Beverly, this is their main cities. And so would you, describe them as being one nation, or each city kind of did their own thing, had their own laws?
I'm going to speak about that now.
And what about earlier colonies? I'm not talking about Carthage, but was there any establishment of the earlier colonies? Like I've mentioned in one of my questions, and most of the people answered correctly, they had a colony in Sicily. Have you known any of the other ones?
Oh yes, I will. That will be in a further slide. So moving on to slide 2. Where did the Phoenicians live? The Phoenicians lived in the Levant, which is actually a geographic, and it's the historical areas of Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and Syria. Actually, Palestine is a small area in the southern part in ancient Canaan, on a narrow strip along the eastern Mediterranean. They occupied the major cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, independent rival cities. Unlike the neighboring inland states, the Phoenicians represented a group of maritime traders rather than a defined country, with the exception of Byblos, which had been a flourishing center from at least the 3rd millennium BC. The Phoenicians first emerged as urban entities around 1500 BC. As Egyptian and Near Eastern documents record, the Late Bronze Age, around 1600 to 1200, was a time of economic prosperity for these trading centers. With the decline of Egyptian influence about 1200 BC, the cities were freed from foreign intervention. Therefore, there was much continuity in Phoenician traditions from the Late Bronze Age until the Hellenistic period, around 300 BC. And here's an image of the ruins of Tyre. Next slide. Any questions or comments? So here's a map and showing the extent of Phoenician trading. The Phoenicians were most noted as exporters of wood. This commodity came from their abundant cedar and fir forests and had been traded since the beginning of recorded history. Cedars of Lebanon the cedars of Lebanon are very famous throughout history, including biblical history. There are cemeteries that are named Cedars of Lebanon. Textiles, another famous export were textiles, which used wool, linen, yarn, and cotton, and later silk. The Phoenicians also traded glassware. From the 7th century BCE, they began to produce transparent glass as opposed to opaque. The Phoenicians appreciated semi-transparent glass for more elaborate productions. Small perfume bottles have been found in Cyprus, Sardinia, and Rhodes. The Phoenicians also imported goods such as metals, especially copper from Cyprus, silver and iron from Spain, and gold from Ethiopia. This raw material was transformed into ornate vessels and art objects in workshops and then exported. Tin from Britain, lead from the Scilly Isles and Spain. Ivory and ebony. Ivory may have been from Punt, which is today's Somalia, and from India. Amber came from either the Baltic or Adriatic coast. Embroidered, that should be linen and grain, from Egypt, and fine cloth from Mesopotamia. Grain, barley, honey, and oak timber used for oars on Phoenician ships came from southern Canaan. The Phoenicians also marketed in slaves. Trading centers were in Cilicia in modern day Turkey, and Phrygia, an ancient Anatolian kingdom, but they also captured Phoenicians themselves. Next page is a huge map of the trading routes from the 11th to the 6th centuries BC. Overpopulation and pressure from the Assyrian Empire to the east. And at the end of the 10th century BC, the Phoenicians sent out colonies westward to settle along the trade routes along the Mediterranean. And here are the 3 cities, and you can spend some time looking at this world history map as it looked during the time of the Phoenician trade. Can you see everything clearly?
Yes. So I have a question. Initially, it was stated that Phoenicians were Semitic people, like from Canaan. Is it a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if this is controversial, but since they're Semitic people, would there be any connection to Habiros or Jews or any Semitic people in around the area, or this is just a hypothesis?
This was at a time before there was organized religious groups, and I didn't focus at all on what would become the Israelites. At this time, each culture worshipped gods, polytheistic, and many of them, although they had different names, they were the gods who basically controlled their lives, including climactic forces. The gods were revered in times of discord, asking for help in times of all daily events were controlled by the gods, and the need of all of these prehistory people to revere and honor these many gods. Obviously, as we know, at some point in time, early on, the Israelites accepted the one God and became a monotheistic religion. And of course, they were surrounded by polytheistic people.
Interesting.
Natural resources of Phoenicia. Although Phoenicia was a coastal strip, it was backed by mountains. A major export were the prize cedars of Lebanon that grew in forests. Mesopotamia and Egypt were the most notable customers. Cedar wood was used by King Solomon for his celebrated temple and to build the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. So you can imagine how profitable the Phoenicians became exporting to wood to Mesopotamia, which was enormous, and Egypt as well. And this is a cedar forest. It's fascinating to read actually about these cedars, and climate has had a major impact on their well-being. And if you want to read some interesting information, they are under these forests are now highly regulated and cared for, as this is a treasure that Lebanon does not want to lose. And this is the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus in Turkey. This is what it might have looked like, would have looked like. And the roof was made of cedar. And here it is in all its splendor. And here it is as ruins at Ephesus. Temple of Artemis was here, and there's also what once was a library, having been there many years ago. Very beautiful. Okay, and this is pretty fascinating. The Phoenicians were really well known for their purple dye from the, I don't know if it was murex or murex mollusk. And Tyrian from Tyre, they were the city that were famous for their purple dye. And the purple is produced from the mucus gland of a predatory sea snail. It's actually a mollusk. So instead of, it should say mollusk, found all along the Mediterranean Sea. It was first manufactured by Phoenicians in the 16th century BC. As many as 10,000 of these mollusks were crushed to produce a single gram of dye. Purple dye was a highly valued commodity, and garments dyed purple were very expensive. They kept their recipe or the procedure for making purple dye a secret. However, the Greeks learned of how they did it, and so creating purple dye became not just products from Phoenicia, this from especially Tyre, but was available in Greece as well. Royalty, that's where the term royal purple came from, because it was so expensive. Commoners couldn't wear purple, and so it was often reserved, or was reserved, for clothing that was made for royalty. Any questions or comments? And one of the greatest contributions is the Phoenician alphabet. The writing system that developed out of the North Semitic alphabet spread over the Mediterranean by Phoenician traders, and therefore of all Western alphabets. The earliest Phoenician inscription that has survived is I've seen his Hiram epitaph dating from the 11th century BC and written in the North Semitic alphabet. And here it is, the sarcophagus of King Hiram with the inscription from Byblos, 10th century BC. And here we have the Phoenician and the chart that on the grid that shows the transformation of Phoenician, and there's early Greek, early Latin, and of course modern Latin. Here's early Aramaic, Nabatean, and early Arabic. The Phoenician language was a lot like Aramaic and ancient Hebrew. Basically, its advantage was it was written, the alphabet only had 22 letters, and words were all consonants. Vowels were not used early on at its inception. Those came later on. And here are just some examples. A carving on stone. It may have been a stele. And here are some examples of Phoenician art. The Phoenicians were highly influenced by the Egyptians, and they would often borrow ideas for their art and craftsmanship from the places that were on their trading routes. And so although scarabs were a major part of Egyptian culture and history, they were also created by the Phoenicians as well. And one of them is the scarab seal. So this would have been in the 6th to 5th century BC. And the scarab's a symbol of regeneration for ancient Egyptians. And Phoenician engravers implemented it into their artwork. This scarab seal right here portrays the Egyptian lord of the underworld, Osiris, surrounded by two protective winged goddesses. These are samples. This one's really small, enhanced glasswork. They were fond of using brightly hued colors in their glass. And so you can see images, well, actually, many of them are replicas of vivid pieces of glasswork with various colors, bright purple, bright blue, green, and yellow and orange. This is an ivory plate with two pharaoh-like figures, and they're standing on opposite sides of a tray. They also produced funerary masks. This happens to be of a young boy, but it's just a generic. And there are many examples of different types of masks, some very human looking, some not quite as human looking. And they did not create, their dead were buried. They did not use any form of mummification, and bodies were, some, of course, the more affluent would be put in a sarcophagus, and common people would have been laid in something far less elaborate.
Beverly, I have a question here from Wendy Ann. She's asking, were the funerary masks used for all levels of society? Where did they use them in all levels of society, funerary masks?
When at the death of a loved one.
But were they used for peasants, slaves, cream de la creme, the kings? Were they using for all levels of society?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, so I'm going to, I suspect definitely for people of the upper class. Common people would have to purchase this. It would depend on their level of I guess affluence. Some of the masks they're generally simple. I don't know if the poor actually would go to lengths to purchase something, or could they even afford to do so. And this would be it would be like going to the market where funerary masks are sold, and they were produced. This is not unique to just one mask. So it's just that of a young boy. It's
Yeah.
not specific to one individual.
Oh, I see. So there's another question that came. Apart from masks, were there any other items buried with the dead? Like
Only, no, different from Egyptian society. Again, upper class, perhaps, yes. Maybe some amulets, but they did believe in the afterlife, but I didn't find anything that compared them to the Egyptians. And of course, it was royalty. Not everyone was mummified and buried with food and wares and, favorite items for the afterlife.
Right.
We often just get to see what the upper classes had done for them. Because obviously there were less of them than there were the peasants or the commoners.
Right. Well, from what I heard also, and again, we'll come to that, obviously, Phoenicians were accused of, obviously, of the child sacrifices, and they used to bury children with the masks. So, and it's really gruesome, what I'm going to say, I apologize, but when the body was getting burned, the masks kept the faces smiling. And that's what they were looking for. And it's almost disgusting, obviously, but that's one of the discoveries that people made. And again, we don't know whether the children were, stale-born, or they were, defect. In most of the cases, children were actually in good health and quite young too. So it's an interesting aspect of it. I just wanted to add to that. Sorry.
I was just to piggyback on what you said. I've done some reading about child sacrifice, and it wasn't done as on a prescribed schedule. Yes, there is absolute evidence that the Phoenicians practiced child sacrifice, but it was done during 3 periods. It was done during war, it was done during famine, and it was done during times of catastrophic climactic events. The practice itself is, you can read on your own exactly what was done. And the remains of these, and mostly they were mostly they were stillborn, very young infants. And and also very young children, maybe under the age of 2. This practice was done actually by the upper class. Death in childbirth was common. Stillborns were common. Life this long ago did not have prenatal care. And so they were surrounded by death and imminent dying. And these offerings were made to the gods whom they believed in and who they revered. The bodies of these sacrificed infants and young children were put in something called a tophet, Tophet, which was similar to, if you, I'm thinking of an amphora, the clay vessels that were used for wine. Only these were much smaller, did not have handles, and they were, these tophets were buried underground. And there has been evidence found in Ashkelon, which is in Israel, and also as far away as Sicily. So, yeah, I mean, living in the 21st century, it's impossible to bring oneself to think of something so abhorrent. But that in fact was, and they were not the only culture who practiced child sacrifice. Certainly in the pre-Columbian cultures, it also went on with the Aztecs and those pre-Columbian cultures. Any questions, comments?
No, I bet which cultures also had practiced similar child sacrifice? I know that in a lot of the South America, there was a adult sacrifice, particularly mine and Aztecas, but didn't really recall a lot of the child sacrifices. Was there any Indo-European cultures maybe, or more specific Pacific culture, or this is pretty unique to, that's why it raises a lot of eyebrows, because I don't think, or maybe Romans had given Phoenicians, because of the Punic Wars, such a crazy name. And also we have a question: how would they choose which child to sacrifice? Children with the birth defects, etc.
It would always be the oldest boy. And then it went on from there. Also, there were times when, and I'm just talking about the Phoenicians, they might not even sacrifice their own child, but would find a commoner and would sacrifice that child. I'm looking child sacrifice in ancient cultures, ancient, okay. Let's see. So definitely there were sacrifices that, of course, is not Europe, it is China. The ancient city of Ur in modern day Iraq But while this may have occurred, it doesn't seem to have been done on a consistent basis as part of a cultural practice, a religious practice.
And then we don't know what age, right? Also the same question. The oldest child, what age? I know they were infants too, right? From 3 months to a year, but what about the oldest child?
Human sacrifice occurred mostly infants.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that. There was another interesting custom that they had, a pretty disgusting too as well, in Sicily. I'm sorry if I'm just diving a little bit to it. Is it okay, Beverly? So,
Of course.
one of the things that that Phoenicians were found in the colonies in Sicily is they used to prostitute the virgins of the so to speak, all of their high society people. So, for example, if there was a high, a merchant that had a daughter that was a virgin, she would go into this temple and live in that temple, and she would be sacrificed and given, prostituted to, let's say, a person who pays the most to sleep with her, and that was a sacrifice given to their god. And if, let's say, it was a pretty girl, she would obviously get picked up pretty quickly. Some merchant would come in, pay a high amount of money, and then she would leave. But until she's sacrificed, she'll have to live in a temple. So I don't know if, and that disgusting custom actually followed Phoenicians everywhere in their colonies and their original Tyre, Sidon cities in the Middle East as well. So have you heard of something like that as well, Beverly?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's quite an interesting aspect. It almost reminds me of the.
Hey, think about World War II and the kamikaze pilots. That was a form of sacrifice. Pilots knew that their mission was not just to kill others, but to kill themselves as well.
Right. Just like with Vikings, they had a special squad, or
exactly,
called the Besturkis, who would eat the mushrooms, to keep them crazy. Basically, they would attack an opposing foes or troops, whatever. And at one point in England, there was a account of one Viking taking on 120 people on the bridge because it was such a narrow bridge, and he was so crazy and basically almost defeated that amount. I mean, it's probably just a hearsay, but everybody gave Vikings such a bad name because of the fact that they basically had that squad of people that didn't care. And obviously they had to be skilled as well, but they were on mushrooms and they were attacking. But so I'm sure kamikazes were given something to drink as well, because a normal sane person, it's impossible to do something like that. Just like we're talking about current suicide bombers and stuff like that. So it's you have to have.
But also I'm thinking back to those people who were under, I'm going to call it the spell by the man who took, not took, but people who followed him, I'm blanking on his name, to French Guiana. and
Oh,
they all drank some type of poisoned liquid.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, some kind of followers.
Right, right. But those are outliers. I mean, we're talking now about uh, uh, sacrifice, child sacrifice as a religious practice. Also, about in Egypt's early history, about 5,000 years ago, human sacrifice was also conducted, although by the end of Egypt's rise and at its height, though, they gave that practice up. So I think that what becomes so shattering to understand was that the Phoenicians did this as a religious practice. And so here it is, the Phoenicians worshipped and revered the Canaanite deities, such as Baal, and I often see his name with the word Hammon after it, Hammon, Astarte, and Melkart. Their worship was spread to the new colonies, went along with the Phoenicians, and spread to the colonies of Tunisia, Cyprus, Malta, Sardinia, Sicily, and Spain. So if here's a sacrifice, and it happens to be of a bird right there. Astarte was actually the goddess of fertility, and also war, which is not. I don't know where it went, but she had a different name in Mesopotamian culture, and I'm thinking it might have been the Assyrians, Ashtar, also goddess of fertility and of war. Melkart was called, he was from Tyre, and he was the god, god of the underworld and cycle of vegetation. She was also connected to anything having to do with the moon. So in fact, I guess as long as we're talking about sacrificing, it was done at night. And then Baal was the god of fertility and weather, especially storms. Each city, Tyre, Byblos, and Sidon, each had their own gods. And so Melkart is actually from the city of Tyre. And one of the things that they did, which was not uncommon in some of these, I know in Mesopotamia, but they would take representations of their gods and bring them with them. For example, the Phoenicians on their ships would take representations of their gods. The other interesting thing about the Phoenicians is they didn't necessarily worship at the representation or the actual they didn't need to be in a temple in order to worship. They also worshipped at water, at rivers, at stones and rocks, which would make sense because theirs was a civilization that was primarily on the Mediterranean, all the time. While I'm thinking about Mesopotamia, they may, let's say it was Assyria or Samaria, they would take whatever gods that they believed in, and they would have representational form as far as something carved in stone or metal, and they would bring these from city to city. And what is the legacy of the Phoenicians? The Phoenicians are one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. They were both praised and despised in antiquity. They were exalted seafarers, valiant explorers, learned scribes, skilled engineers, and gifted artisans. However, these traits also caused contempt and scorn. They were seen as cheaters who could not be trusted, who kidnapped the helpless and traded in human lives, and morally corrupt, who to honor their gods sacrificed their infants. There is little left of Phoenician writing. I guess here's the irony, and nothing about what they said of themselves. They wrote on papyrus, which they took from Egyptian civilization. And unlike Egypt, which is dry and hot, they lived in a humid climate, the Phoenicians. Thus, their stories are lost to the effects of water. And here's one of their sculptures. This is made of glass. And I'm not sure, I know this is glass, I'm not sure about the face, the back part of the face. Right here looks like a serpent. And that's my story.
Thank you, Beverly. What I want to do right now is, this was really amazing. I want to play a little music from the ancient Carthage, which was the colony of Phoenicians, and then I'm going to dive into a really small summary, and it'll dive into a little bit more, discussion of sacrifices. And so let me stop sharing now, and I'm going to put up the music of how the Phoenician vocals would, or Carthage vocals would sound. Carthage was a colony of Phoenicians. Give me 1 second, I'll set it up. Thank you again, Beverly. All right. 1 second. Pulling it up. And again, just to start talking about it a little bit. So about 900 BC, Tyre and Sidon, and if you know, around that time we had something called the Bronze Age collapse, which basically out of nowhere, a lot of the really prominent cities disappeared. Mycenaean and Minoan culture in Greece and Cyprus, the Ugarit culture, which was connecting Egypt, Hittites, which was Anatolia. So they basically disappeared out of the blue. And then somewhere around that time, Tyre, particularly Queen Dido from Tyre, tried to set up a colony in Carthage, which is modern day Tunis. And so this is what, oh God, 1 second. What's it doing? Okay, so basically, famously, Romans had a Punic War. Punic stands for Carthage, which was actually a Latin word for Carthage. And basically, the 3 wars that happened with Carthage were pretty devastating to both Romans and Carthaginians. And mostly they fought over the islands in Sicily, which I were just talking about, was the colony of Carthage, or Phoenician colony. So initially it was a Phoenician colony, and then it was then it became Carthaginian colony because Phoenicians fell to Alexander the Great. Sidon, Tyre, one of the lost cities that actually fell Alexander the Great, and they were hard to conquer, but he did conquer them eventually. And there's a famous battle in Tyre. So let me just put up the video on YouTube of the vocals, and after that we'll dive into a little bit more of a history of a Carthage. So I'm putting it up right now. All right, let me share it. Sorry, guys, my computer is a little slow. There it is.
Until you get started, I guess there were a couple of things I wanted to add. When you think, okay.
Okay, you got it? Okay, I'm starting now.
Fine.
You guys can see it? Oh, you guys can't hear it?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm very sorry. Okay, I'm gonna start from the beginning. I don't know why it's doing that. 1 second. Let me do this. All right, I know why it's happening. Let me just share the screen. I think this is what's happening. Some reason the share video doesn't work. All right, how about can you hear it?
No.
Still not. Oh well. All right. What's going on here? Oh, okay, participants. Okay, more.
It's actually frozen.
What's frozen? Yeah, because I just froze it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think it was my fault. Yeah. Nothing?
No.
All right. Okay, then you know what? I'm gonna figure it out later. I don't know why it's doing that, but in any case, let me just go into a little bit more detail about Carthage, and I'll figure out what the issue is. I'm so sorry about that. It's just not. All right. I'm gonna do it. Please, can you see my screen now? Beverly, can you see my screen?
There, it's blank.
It's coming up. Presentation, full screen. You can see Prezi right now, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So Carthage, as I've said, was basically, here's a map of Carthage. So what happened is people from Tyre basically are tired of this infertile land, and it's very hard to develop agriculture in the area, Middle East. In Egypt, it was a different case. There was a breadbasket, but let me just go back. Sorry. Okay, just do this presentation. All right, so Egypt was a breadbasket, but right next to Tunis, Queen Dido, who was from Tyre, found a land where it was 900 BC. She wanted to set up her colony from Phoenicians, and the way that she tricked the kings that lived there is by saying to them, if I get the ship, the ship's cover, for example, or skin, and whatever I can cover the ship's skin, whatever land, that's land I need for my people, Phoenicians that live in Africa. And so what happened is she tricked her. She cut the pieces of the ship's skin, and she went around huge land, and she put the pieces in different areas and said, that's my land. So she basically lied, like it would could go particularly hand in hand with what Beverly had said, and she carved basically the whole island, of Carthage and Tunis. It was a big area, and they were a pretty developed nation. As you can see, they built a port, and the bottom is a port. So this port was pretty unique. It was actually destroyed by Romans, and the port had it was a know-how of those days. They had different ships that would go in. They would go into their own, so to speak, areas. The merchant ships would stay in inside. Sorry, what happened here? Oh, sorry about that. The merchant ships would stay, so to speak, inside, harbor of the port, and the warrior ships would stay in outside harbor of the port. But almost you would think of it as a horse staple, right? Every ship has its own area to service, almost like the if you ever seen the NASCAR, every car is being serviced, every ship would have been serviced, and it was just in the same as you can see the port in the area. I'm sorry, somebody wanted to add something? No, okay. So anyway, so around 200 BC, the Phoenicians, we're talking about 700 years later, were pretty amazing merchants. And then we can think about Romans, it was still republic. There was no Caesar, there was no emperors, but they had, if you remember, they had different counselors that would, um, uh, at the time of a war, be considered imperator, and in about for 6 months they would be in charge of Rome. They would basically go to war. So the Carthage at the time had a pretty stable colony in Sicily, and Sicily was a breadbasket. If you today look at the Sicilians, they don't look nothing like Western European, because there's a combination of Arab, Phoenician influence. We had Lombards that came from Viking lands. They have Italics who was have Latin. So it's a mixed blood of people, so to speak. And Phoenicia had hand in it. They were the first ones, essentially. And so what happened is Rome had decided that they want part of Sicily, which was already settled by Greeks and Sicilians. Greeks, as you know, Archimedes was actually in Syracuse, and Syracuse was the Greek a colony of Athens. And basically, Greeks were there, were already fighting Phoenicians for the territory. So Phoenicians, were able to establish themselves, and so Romans came in, and there's this guy. His name is Hannibal Barca, who was the father of the Hannibal, the famous Hannibal. He basically, tried to help in the First Punic War to beat up Rome. Romans were not a naval power at the time, and what happened is, since Rome is now a naval power, they stole a Phoenician ship, and they were able to replicate a know-how of Phoenician triremes, and they developed their own, and they developed something even new. That it was like a ladder. So every time there would be a situation where the Roman ship would attack Phoenician, they would basically throw a ladder there with the hooks, and then they will just jump on the Phoenician ship, and then they'll just conduct almost like a land war, so to speak. So in the First Punic War, it was about 25 years. Phoenicians lost a lot of their Sicilian lands. Then Hannibal Barca, has a son, Hannibal, and they go to Spain to develop a colony in Iberia, the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and they receive almost no help from Carthage themselves. So Hannibal Barca develops a really profitable colony in Iberia, and his son is becoming a pretty amazing warrior. At that time, it was required for Carthage to pay homage to Rome. They owe them a lot of money. It was part of the Armistice treatment. And Rome, whatever they want, would show up at Carthage, area, and would say, "Listen, we're gonna be allied with the Etruscan tribe." Or 1 second. 1 second. They Rome, whenever they wanted to, would ally themselves intentionally with a foe of the Carthage in Iberian Peninsula, and it would say, okay, so we have to support this Gaul tribe, or we need to support that Gaul tribe. So one time, the Hannibal wanted to exert the influence on in Iberian Peninsula, and Romans said, "You can't do it," and Hannibal just basically kicked out all Roman ambassadors, and then declared a war on Rome, and subsequently won a lot of the battles. There was two major battles. One, at Lake Tresemme. And at the Lake Tresemme, the way the battle is known is because the young Scythian, they call him Scipio Africanus, who eventually would defeat Hannibal, escaped with his life, and his father was defeated in that battle. And then the second battle that happened, it was a Khan, and famous words of Hannibal's general Massinissa, who was a Numidian cavalry member. He basically said, you know how to win the battles, but you don't know how to win the war, because Hannibal would not attack. Hannibal would not attack Rome because he thought they didn't have enough of the siege machine battle, siege machines. He didn't have enough supplies. So Hannibal decided to go around and, basically, waste land in, Italy. He was very successful for 2 years, but then Romans decide to use the tactics of scorched earth, and they were able to basically contain Hannibal, even though they lost every battle against him. So now Roman decided to attack Carthage. Basically they wanted to use their escadra, and then they, basically swam over on the other side of the in Africa, and they attacked Zama, which is the capital of Carthage. And Hannibal was swiftly recalled in Zama, and famously lost the Battle of Zama because a lot of these Numidian cavalry defected to Rome. So that was the Second Punic War. First one with his father, second one with him. Then, according to the agreement, when they lost, Carthage lost, Romans decided to basically restrict Carthage. But Carthage was such a seafaring state, they were able in 4 years regain all their powers. Even though they didn't have any warships, they were able to reestablish their trading routes. And one time, Cicero, famously, and Cato, I don't know if you know this guy, Cato, he was part of Senate. He actually traveled to Zama and said, and famously brought dates, the fruit, the fruit dates back to Rome, and he said, "Did you ever see such large dates? We're literally hungry here in Rome, and look what they're eating in Zama." So I declare we need to go ahead and destroy Carthage. And then they basically, had a third war where, Carthage was completely destroyed. And then there was a particular a case where Cato said it was raised, and then they actually poured salt on top of the scorched earth, and was burned, and there was nothing left after that. There was a famous Carthaginian library, so there's not a lot survived from Carthage. But according to their way of life, I mean, they already had a inside Carthage. There's each house had has a sewage system. They had toilets. They were extremely high level. So that's the Third Punic War. So it's kind of like a summary of what happened. So Carthage was no more. It was a lost Phoenician outpost, and that's basically it. Anybody has any questions, or I'll unmute everybody basically. If you have any questions, you can just ask me, or so I unmuted everybody. All right. So Beverly, you have any questions, or anybody? No? I'll try to see if I can go ahead and put that music again. Let me stop sharing. Okay, I just want to go through some images for the Punic War. Oops. So this is Sicilian Peninsula. Numidians were part of the cavalry for Carthage. This is Gaul. This is he's not been part of the First Punic War. This is Hannibal. You know, not Hannibal Barca, but Hannibal, his son. The Second Punic War. This is Second Punic War. It was conducted. This is where they were located in Iberia. Hannibal Barca and Hannibal, and then they attacked through Lake Tresemme, and you know, and they famously crossed the Alps. I remember reading that Hannibal had 40 elephants when he entered Alps. He only was able to cross Alps with 2 elephants. The 38 died, and he also lost an eye because he got beaten by a bug, and his eye just, you know, went out. Then this is the Alps. You see how tough it is. There's only 2 people that remember successfully cross the Alps. Him and Suvorov, who was the Tsar Alexander's general, or they call him generalissimus. There's only 4 generalissimus in the world, and Suvorov was one of them. This is the army. So famously, Balearic slingers were part of the Carthaginian army. You see the elephants, he used elephants. It was only 2 that he used, and so, you know, there's not that many. In the Battle of Zama, there was a lot of elephants, but what happened, Rome figured out how to deal with the elephants. So what they did is, whenever the elephants would attack, they will open up the ranks, and elephants would just go through the ranks, and then basically they just keep going. And the Hut, who was on top of the elephants, when they get killed, or elephant would go crazy, the Hut would kill the elephant by striking the sarissa, or the you know, the long whatever it is, and into the brain of the elephant, and the elephant died, because they would normally almost always go against their own army. So this is, you know, 3 victories: Trebia, Tresemme, Caen. Caen, it was such a big defeat to Rome that every 10th of Roman had lost somebody, and in Senate, every second, you know, senator lost somebody. And I remember Hannibal took about 40,000 rings, which Romans used to wear the rings, back to Zama, Carthage, and asked them if they can give him help, because he just defeated 40,000 Romans. It took him 3 days to slaughter. He used an interesting formation. It's called a Muro formation. Basically, he succumbed. He made the front line so weak, and Romans thought they were winning, and the flanks would take over from there, and basically they encircled. I don't know if you ever seen the Battle of Bastards in what is it called? In Game of Thrones. That's actually the formation of Hannibal. He destroyed. It took him 3 days to slaughter Romans by hand, basically. Then a Third Punic War, destruction of Zama, and we already spoke about. You see, as I was saying, how advanced they were. Each of the houses had their own sewage system, and this is their port, obviously. So the population at their peak were 500,000 in Zama. The language was extinct. You know, Punic language was a Phoenician. Largest group is Phoenicians, as we have said. Helped develop a Western alphabet. We already spoke about. Tribal religion involved human sacrifice. We spoke about it. Used slingers, which is Balearic slingers, not archers, for long-range attack during the battle. And that would be it. Any questions anybody have, or wanted to add anything? Hello?
Yeah, I wanted to add a few strands. If you think about it, that the Phoenician alphabet is actually the basis of not just the alphabet, but our written language today. I was thinking about the word phoneme, which I don't know, but I suspect it has its origin with Phoenician. And a phoneme is the way a particular letter sounds, and how this culture, how this society, this civilization that lived so many years ago has provided us and most of the Western world of its written language.
Oh, by the way, I figured out how to play this. So I'm going to share, and you guys can see the screen, and then and we'll come back to your comments. I apologize, Beverly. Sorry. Go ahead.
Not a problem.
Go ahead with your comments, and then at the end, I'm going to play it on my phone, and you guys can see the screen as well. So that would be the best probably to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on my phone, and you can see both. Let me start. You guys can hear it?
Not really.
Not really? What about?
Start it.
Can you hear it?
No.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's just weird. All right, never mind. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish what you have to do. I don't know.
No, I was just talking about the alphabet and their writing. And it was the simplicity of it, of just using consonants. And having been an elementary school teacher, I taught older grades, but it's so interesting that young children, when they write in their invented spelling, they only write the letters that they hear, and it's always consonants. They write in only consonants, and so you can always understand what they've written. And in fact, even you could be given, I don't know, find it online, a piece of script and have the whole thing written in consonants, and you're able to understand it. So that's a thanks to the Phoenicians.
Interesting. I mean, if you think of phonetic, where that came from, it's Phoenician.
Right, phonetic.
Yeah.
And yeah, and consonants are phonetic.
Yeah. So we'll try one more time. Somebody just sent me a link. I don't know why it's not doing it. It's just so weird. I'm so sorry. I wanted, last time we did the let me just, maybe because I didn't have my video on. Let me try it one more time. Oof, this is so difficult. Sorry about that. All right, let's start from here. Can you see the screen first?
Yes.
Now, what about the music? Can you hear?
Only intermittent sound.
Okay, let me try it for Chrome. Maybe Chrome. They just sent me a link, so it's coming up. Yeah, I don't know. Explorer is not letting me, but here, somebody just sent me a Chrome. Maybe let's try that. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Anybody has any questions on Carthage, maybe, or Punic Wars, or if you guys want to watch more of Punic Wars, we have detailed videos, presented by others in our YouTube channel. history of fitness investing, and then
Does anyone have any questions or comments about the Phoenicians?
Phoenicians or Carthage? I guess not. Okay, here. Okay. Interesting. Oh, here. Okay, so let's try this. There it is. I think they should work now. If it doesn't work, I digress.
You're fighting a good fight.
Yeah, I mean, normally presentations go to 2 o'clock, so okay. Super slow. Apple computer. Okay. All right. I heard. I guess if you guys heard, that would be the sample from the Carthage. But anyway, if you guys don't have any questions or to close it up, I want to thank Beverly. I want to thank everybody on Sunday coming in. I'm sorry for the spotty video, but we were just trying to get. Last time we did the Mesopotamian singing, particularly, and it was amazing. So check out that video by Beverly as well. And I wish everybody a nice week, the rest of the weekend, and and Beverly, we'll talk about our next presentation. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye, Beverly. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
You're welcome.